China's intelligence and security agency has reportedly arrested dozens of Chinese nationals engaged in arms smuggling with North Korea.
Something deeply unsettling is unfolding along the China-North Korea border, and the world is watching in disbelief. Satellite images, leaked reports, and urgent military movements have sparked global alarm, with experts warning that this isn't just routine border activity. From mysterious construction projects to sudden disappearances and an eerie military silence, what's happening behind the fences is raising serious questions. Is this a covert operation, a humanitarian crisis, or something far more dangerous? Whatever it is, the truth is starting to surface, and it's more shocking than anyone imagined. North Korea's shadow economy. When the COVID-19 pandemic swept through the world, North Korea felt the shock in a uniquely devastating way. Almost overnight, the country's fragile markets crumbled. Shelves emptied, prices soared. People scrambled to buy whatever food they could find. But the panic only made things worse. Supplies ran out, and hunger spread like wildfire. For many North Koreans, starvation was no longer a distant fear. It was knocking at their doors. In the midst of the chaos, one lifeline emerged: smuggling. At first, it was the private smugglers, brave, desperate individuals who risked death to carry goods across the tightly guarded borders. These unsung heroes of the black market became the invisible hands keeping families alive. They brought in essentials: rice, medicine, batteries, and more. Each successful trip across the border meant another day of survival for someone. But they weren't alone for long. Soon, state-approved smugglers joined the game. These were government-linked trading companies, quietly permitted to operate despite the heavy international sanctions meant to isolate the regime. While the world believed North Korea was cut off, a shadow economy was thriving behind the scenes. So, what was moving across the borders? Leaving North Korea were bizarre but valuable items: traditional herbal medicines, rare mushrooms, and even dried leeches, all prized in parts of China for their supposed healing properties. Entering North Korea were far more industrial and modern goods: motors, machinery parts, medications, even cars. China played a major role. Chinese traders sent raw materials across the border, which North Korean workers, earning next to nothing, would transform into finished products. These were then quietly sent back into China, disguised as legitimate trade. But here's where things get even more intriguing. The very soldiers assigned to guard the borders and ordered to shoot intruders on sight often became participants in the trade. The reason? Money. Bribes changed everything. Enough cash could convince a guard to turn a blind eye, or even help smuggle the goods in. In some of the most daring operations, smugglers began hiding gold within shipments, a dangerous game that, if discovered, could lead to execution. But again, money talked. With the right amount in the right hands, officials would pretend they saw nothing. Smuggling in North Korea isn't just a crime. It's a way of life. It's a system born out of desperation, sustained by risk and fueled by corruption. It keeps the black markets alive when the official ones collapse. It's watched by soldiers, run by gamblers, and quietly permitted by a regime that benefits from the very thing it claims to outlaw. In a land where survival is often a matter of chance, smuggling is not just rebellion, it's resilience. What exactly triggered the smuggling between both two countries? Why did the government close down the borders? Let's dig into the details of the border where even birds die. When the silence broke. It was the morning of January 2nd, 2020, a day that began like any other in the remote villages near North Korea's border with China. The air was calm, and the usual rhythm of rural life continued. Farmers tending their plots, families preparing breakfast, and the peaceful silence of early dawn hanging over the landscape. But then, without warning, that quiet was violently interrupted. Gunshots rang out, loud, sharp, and continuous. The mountains echoed with the frightening sound, breaking the sleepy morning stillness. Startled villagers, hearts racing, stepped outside in confusion and fear. They looked anxiously toward the Two-Man River, the natural border separating North Korea and China, expecting the worst, perhaps an invasion or a border conflict. But what they saw was far stranger and more unsettling. No enemy soldiers, no foreign agents. Instead, the targets of the gunfire were birds, crows, gliding harmlessly across the sky from the Chinese side of the border, were being mercilessly shot down. Some tumbled into the flowing river, their black feathers drifting with the current. Others landed with a thud on dry land, only to be collected, piled up, and set ablaze. The entire scene was surreal, like something out of a dark film. Why such a brutal response to birds in flight? The answer was as bizarre as it was terrifying. North Korea, consumed by paranoia, had entered full crisis mode over the emergence of COVID-19. With little evidence or scientific understanding, the regime became convinced that the virus could travel into the country not just through humans, but through animals, especially birds that crossed the border. In their minds, every creature flying in from China was a possible carrier of the deadly virus. And so, a harsh and extreme policy was born: kill any animal that moved. The regime didn't take any chances. They dispatched elite soldiers, men trained for real warfare, to line the banks of the river. These were not border patrols looking for smugglers or illegal crossings. Their mission was far more unusual: eliminate wildlife. Armed not just with guns, but with explosives, these troops were ordered to shoot down anything with wings or paws, anything that dared to move across the invisible line between nations. This wasn't just a precautionary measure. It was the beginning of one of the most radical and grim pandemic policies in the world, a reaction driven more by fear and misinformation than reason. In their desperate attempt to stop the virus from entering the country, North Korean officials turned their border zone into a battlefield, not against people, but against nature itself. Villagers could only watch, horrified and confused, as birds were hunted with the kind of force usually reserved for enemy combatants. The sound of gunfire became part of their daily lives, and the sight of burning animal remains a new and grotesque normal. This eerie chapter of early 2020 reveals just how deeply the pandemic shook nations, and how far some governments were willing to go in the face of an invisible enemy. In North Korea, the fear of COVID-19 didn't just change policy. It transformed the skies above the border into a war zone, where even birds couldn't fly without risking death. Shutting down borders was understandable, but what explanation can justify the killing of innocent birds and animals? Let's delve further into the strict border terms enforced by North Korea. Buffer zones, burned birds, and the border of no return. During the COVID-19 pandemic, most countries responded with border closures, lockdowns, and health precautions. But North Korea took things to an entirely different, almost dystopian level. They didn't just shut their borders, they turned them into militarized zones of fear. Entire buffer areas were created, stretching as far as 2 kilometers from the country's actual border. These weren't just no-go zones, they were deadly. Soldiers were told, in plain and brutal terms, shoot to kill. It didn't matter who or what tried to cross into North Korea. Whether it was a human being, a stray dog, or even a pigeon fluttering by, the order was the same: pull the trigger. And it didn't stop there. What happened after the shooting was equally grim. Soldiers were instructed to stay at least 6 feet away from the body, never to touch it, and immediately call the country's anti-epidemic task force. The fear of the virus was so intense that even the dead were treated as infectious hazards. There was no chance of a proper burial or even basic human dignity, just silence, distance, and dread. As paranoia swept across the nation, the fear of the virus mutated into something even more bizarre. Local authorities in some areas took things further by ordering the killing of stray animals, particularly cats and pigeons. The claim? These animals might be spreading the virus across the border from China. The result was tragic. Mass exterminations of harmless creatures, all in the name of safety. The people of North Korea, already struggling with food shortages and daily hardships, couldn't help but see the dark humor in the situation. In hushed tones, some joked, "Even people here don't have enough to eat. Why would a cat risk crossing the border to come here?" It was sarcasm rooted in frustration, a desperate attempt to find sanity in the madness. But this wasn't just a case of local officials going overboard or rural villages acting on superstition. No, this was national policy. It came from the top and was enforced by military commands. It was carried out not with nets or traps, but with rifles and live ammunition. It transformed ordinary animals into perceived bioweapons and turned the natural world into a battleground. The country's response to the pandemic revealed not just a deep fear of infection, but a willingness to blur the lines between caution and cruelty. In North Korea, the war against COVID-19 became a war against nature itself. Every bird in the sky, every animal that wandered too close, and even the breath of a stranger was treated as a possible threat. In a world already shaken by fear, North Korea built a fortress of suspicion, one bullet at a time. And behind that fortress stood a government that didn't just fear a virus, it feared anything it couldn't control. Apart from the smuggling happening at the border, are there other mysteries that revolve around the border? Let's dive into the details of North Korea's hidden tunnels. The underground secrets. Beyond the loud echoes of gunfire and the eerie silence of North Korea's forests, there lurks an even deeper mystery, one buried not just in whispers, but beneath the very ground itself. It's not about missiles, nor spy birds, but something far more secretive, the rumored escape tunnels built specifically for Kim Jong-un and his most trusted allies. Far away in the remote, rugged mountains of Jagang Province, a harsh and heavily guarded region bordering China, locals have been murmuring about strange underground activities. These aren't the kind of tales you'd expect about smuggling routes or hidden weapons caches. Instead, villagers speak of vast, secretive underground construction projects with one chilling purpose: an emergency escape route for North Korea's leadership. In the event of a sudden war, uprising, or total collapse, these hidden tunnels could become the lifeline for Kim Jong-un and his inner circle. But this isn't just village gossip. Multiple reports from sources with knowledge of the area suggest that the North Korean regime has been building vast bunkers and passageways hundreds of feet below the Earth's surface. These aren't your ordinary tunnels. These are reinforced, military-grade corridors designed to withstand bombings, surveillance, and time. Some say they connect all the way to remote exit points near the Chinese border, ready to be used if the regime's survival is ever threatened. Adding to the intrigue is the level of secrecy involved in the construction. Workers who were brought in to help dig these tunnels reportedly experienced extreme precautions. They were blindfolded before boarding buses, which had their windows completely blacked out. The workers had no idea where they were being taken. Even upon arrival, their movement was strictly controlled, ensuring no one could ever retrace their steps. The construction is believed to be under the command of North Korea's elite 1st Brigade of Military Engineers, an ultra-loyal unit said to be personally handpicked and trusted by Kim Jong-un himself. When it comes to building the impossible and keeping secrets, this brigade reportedly leads the way. As outlandish as it sounds, North Korea has a history that backs this up. Between the 1960s and the 1980s, the regime secretly built several massive invasion tunnels under the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, aimed at launching surprise attacks on South Korea. 4 of these tunnels were eventually discovered, shocking the world. But military analysts believe there could be many more still hidden underground, undetected and ready for use. This is a country that has turned secrecy into an art. If anyone knows how to dig deep, build fast, and hide it from the world. It's North Korea. So the next time you think of North Korea as just a land of parades and propaganda, remember this: beneath the mountains, beneath the soil, and the surface of global attention lies a dark labyrinth of tunnels, possibly carved out to ensure the survival of a regime that refuses to fall. Whether or not we'll ever see these tunnels remains unknown, but their existence suggests that even North Korea's top leadership is planning for the unthinkable, and they may already have their escape route prepared. So, could the military occupation at the North Korean border be a disguise for the underground secrets, or it was a mere illusion of control? Let's delve into the details of the North Korean style of fortifying her borders during the pandemic. Barbed wires and broken borders. Most nations closed their borders with regulations, travel bans, and limitations when COVID-19 swept the world. North Korea, however, went to a whole new level. It didn't just close its border, it fortified it with layers of fences, armed guards, and military posts. The regime responded with what appeared to be a show of strength and absolute control, building fence after fence, like a desperate fortress bracing for an invasion. By 2022, human rights observers reported that the country had constructed more than 460 miles of fencing along its northern border, mostly the one it shares with China. These fences weren't just lines of barbed wire. They came with guard towers spaced regularly along the stretch, military outposts at strategic points, and foot patrols watching around the clock. In fact, every 360 feet, about the length of a football field, there was a military structure of some sort, creating the illusion of an unbreachable barrier. But here's where things get strange and telling. Despite all the effort, many of these fences weren't exactly what they seemed. Eyewitness accounts and satellite imagery revealed that much of the wire was poorly made, thin enough to be blown around by the wind. In a country starved of resources and struggling under international sanctions, even basic construction materials were hard to come by. With trade nearly frozen and budgets drained, soldiers and villagers were forced to twist thin wires together by hand. These makeshift fences looked intimidating from a distance, but up close, they were weak, fragile, and easily torn apart. Why build them at all, then? The truth is as revealing as it is tragic. The fencing was never really meant to keep people in or out. It was a performance, a carefully crafted illusion of state control. Officials had received strict orders: build fences to defend the homeland. So, they obeyed. No one asked whether they were effective. No one cared. What mattered was the image it projected, that North Korea was sealed, secure, and in command. But behind the illusion, life along the border continued much as before. The lifeblood of these border towns wasn't government rations or official trade. It was smuggling. For years, unofficial cross-border trade had helped families survive. And despite the fences, the guards, and the government's threats, smuggling didn't stop. It couldn't, and it didn't. Beneath the shaky strands of wire and the rigid faces of border guards, a silent network of survival thrived, quietly defying the illusion of control. While many believe that North Korea is beginning to relax her border policies, some other factors have emerged, abruptly frustrating the plans on pandemic recovery. What happened? Let's find out. Pandemic recovery faces flooding and strategic dismantling. The Sinuiju-Dandong border crossing between North Korea and China is far more than just a checkpoint. It's a lifeline for the North Korean economy. This single crossing point handles over 98% of the country's official trade with China, making it a vital artery for goods, fuel, and essential supplies. But when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, that flow came to a near standstill. To adapt, North Korea took the unusual step of converting the nearby Uiju Air Base, originally a military facility, into a temporary rail and disinfection hub. This allowed the regime to manage tightly controlled imports while minimizing the risk of virus transmission. As the world slowly emerged from the pandemic, signs of economic recovery began to appear in North Korea, particularly in late 2023 and into mid-2024. Satellite images captured increasing truck traffic, expanded storage for shipping containers, and renewed energy around the Uiju facility, proof that trade was slowly picking up. The timing was especially notable, coinciding with President Vladimir Putin's visit to North Korea in June 2024, suggesting a renewed push for diplomacy and economic cooperation. Then, disaster struck. In late July 2024, massive floods hit the Sinuiju region, causing widespread damage. Entire neighborhoods, roads, and railways were overwhelmed by water. The area surrounding the Uiju facility wasn't spared. Rail lines were submerged and support structures washed away. Although the facility itself survived the flooding, the damage to the surrounding infrastructure made railway transport nearly impossible. As a result, trucks became the primary mode of moving goods across the border once again. But what came next caught analysts completely off guard. In early August 2024, satellite images began to show a surprising development. The Uiju disinfection and rail transfer facility was being dismantled. Piece by piece, containers vanished, roofs were carefully removed, and steel frames were taken down in an orderly fashion, as though the materials were being preserved for future use. By September 8th, nearly the entire facility had been cleared, with only the concrete loading docks left behind. Why dismantle a major logistics hub just months after it saw increasing activity? The answer is still unclear. Some speculate the flooding made the site too costly or difficult to repair. Others believe North Korea's leadership may be pivoting once again, shifting back to direct rail links with China, or restoring the Uiju site to its original role as a military airbase. Notably, parts of the base that were never converted, like the command buildings and barracks, remain untouched, supporting the idea of a military revival. Now, fresh indicators suggest North Korea is indeed bringing Uiju back online as an airbase. If true, this move marks a significant shift, not only in logistics and infrastructure, but possibly in military strategy along the Chinese border. What this means for the future of trade, diplomacy, and regional security is still unfolding, but all eyes are now fixed on Uiju. So, till when do you think the North Korea's border with China would remain shut? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.